October 4, 1930. A letter, sealed and stamped with the might of an empire that didn't believe in sunsets, passes out of the forbidding, barred gates of Lahore Central Jail. The letter wings its way freely across the green fields of Punjab, tinged with sunset red, to a sleepy village called Banga, anxious for news of its beloved son, who is not free. In a country that is not free. The letter wings like an arrow carrying a son's hurt and bewilderment straight to the heart of a father. A letter which says that the son wishes to die, written to a father who hoped to save him. But this is not a story of death and despair. This is a saga of survival and hope. Had he lived today, Sardar Bhagat Singh would have celebrated his birth centenary this September. On March 23, 1931, Shaheed Bhagat Singh walked to the gallows with his head held high, along with fellow martyrs Rajguru and Sukhdev, all three charged with the murder of J.P. Saunders, a deputy superintendent of police. Towards the end of the much publicized case called the Lahore Conspiracy Case, Sardar Kishan Singh, Bhagat Singh's father, made a written request to the special tribunal set up to expedite the case, pleading his son's innocence. When news of this reached Bhagat Singh in his prison cell, he was deeply hurt and wrote a strong letter of protest to his father.
My dear father, I was astounded to learn that you had submitted a petition to the members of the special tribunal in connection with my defense. This intelligence proved to be too severe a blow to be borne with equanimity. It has upset the whole equilibrium of my mind. I have not been able to understand how you could think it proper to submit such a petition at this stage and in these circumstances. In spite of all the sentiments and feelings of a father, I don't think you were at all entitled to make such a move on my behalf without even consulting me.
What were the sentiments and feelings of this father? Why is the equilibrium of his son's mind upset? How is it that two members of a patriotic family cannot see eye to eye on a matter of principle? To get a clear perspective on this letter, we must move to village Banga of Layalpur district in Punjab, now in Pakistan, where Bhagat Singh is born to a Sikh family of farmers. This is not an ordinary family of farmers, and these are no ordinary times. Punjab is a politically charged state soon to bleed with memories of Jallianwala Bagh. Right and left, good down, fire! Bhagat Singh's grandfather, Arjun Singh, was drawn to the Arya Samaj, a reformist movement of Hinduism, and took keen interest in the proceedings of the Indian National Congress. Bhagat Singh's father, Kishan Singh, and uncle Ajit Singh were members of the Gaddar Party founded in the United States in the early years of the century to rout the British rule in India. Both were jailed for alleged anti-British activities. Ajit Singh had 22 cases against him and was forced to leave the country to escape retribution for his revolutionary activities. This was Bhagat Singh's inheritance. His biographer, Rajshekhar Vyas, takes up the story of Bhagat Singh's childhood.
At the age of 9, one day he visited Jallianwala Bagh and accepted the school. And suddenly, his own thoughts about Gandhi and philosophy of non-violence turned into revolutionary. When he returned, he asked his father, even his uncle, why we grow this grain and other things in our land. Why don't we grow banduk, revolvers or pistols in our land or farms?
Bhagat Singh studied at the National College in Lahore, founded by Lala Lajpat Rai, a towering revolutionary figure of the times. He became a member of a youth organization called the Naujawan Bharat Sabha, where he was drawn towards fellow young revolutionaries like Chandrasekhar Azad, B.K. Dutt, and others.
मेरा रंग दे बसंती चोला, मेरा रंग दे बसंती चोला, मेरा रंग दे बसंती चोला, मेरा रंग दे बसंती चोला.
They used to print handouts in newspapers in secret to spread political awareness in the country, then a banned activity punishable with imprisonment. He also joined the Hindustan Socialist Republican Association, which was then headed by Ram Prasad Bismil and Ashfaqullah Khan. At the age of 16, Bhagat Singh ran away from home to avoid early marriage. The letter he wrote to his father read thus.
Dear Father, Sat Sri Akal, my life remains bequeathed to the supreme cause, that is the freedom of the nation. Comfort and worldly desires have therefore no attraction for me. You may recall that when I was young, my grandfather had announced during my Yagyupavit ceremony that I had been bequeathed to the service of the nation. Therefore, I am trying to fulfill the same. I hope you will forgive me. Yours obediently, Bhagat Singh.
Durga Bhabi, wife of revolutionary leader Bhagwati Charan Vora, tells us about Bhagat Singh's views on marriage.
Bhagat Singh was about 16 when his father wished to see him employed and settled down. Marriage plans were on the anvil. Bhagat Singh came to know of these plans and did his best to avoid such shackles. He had already confided in his mother that she need not be bothered about his marriage, as the same had already been taken care of. The gallows would be his wedding altar, the hangman's noose his wedding garland, and death his chosen bride.
Death was his chosen bride. The hangman's noose his wedding garland. But this is not a story of death and loss, but a saga of courage and conviction. Bhagat Singh was not going to defend himself and made this point clear in the letter to his father.
I hope you can recall that since the very beginning you have been trying to convince me to fight my case very seriously and to defend myself properly. But you also know that I was always opposed to it. I never had any desire to defend myself and never did I seriously think about it. Whether it was a mere vague ideology or that I had certain arguments to justify my position is a different question, and that cannot be discussed here.
In this recording from the archives of All India Radio, Bhagat Singh's brother Kultar Singh elaborates on Bhagat Singh's principle of martyrdom.
उन्होंने कभी एक मिनट के लिए भी अपने आप को बचाने की कोशिश नहीं की। मुकदमे के दौरान में भी उन्होंने अपनी तरफ से वकील पेश नहीं किया। अदालत में कहा कि हमने जो कुछ किया है उसके लिए सज़ा भुगतने के लिए हम तैयार हैं। हम क्रांतिकारी लोग अपने विचारों के लिए बड़ी से बड़ी कुर्बानी देने के लिए तैयार हैं। पिताजी ने उनके सफाई के लिए अदालत को लिखा तो उन्होंने पिताजी को ख़त लिखा कि पिताजी आप देशभक्त हैं, लेकिन आज आप इम्तहान में फेल हुए हैं, आज आप पुत्र प्रेम में आ गए हैं। मेरी ज़िंदगी इतनी कीमती नहीं कि असूलों को दे के उसे बचाया जाए। हम तो जद्दोजहद आज़ादी में ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा कुर्बानियाँ करना चाहते हैं और इसी के लिए हम अपना आदर्श बलिदानों का जो है उसे पूरा करना चाहते हैं।
Why would a 23-year-old harbor a death wish? The answer lies in a series of incidents going back to the Simon Commission set up in 1928 by the British government to report on political happenings. There was not a single Indian member in this commission, and all political parties decided to boycott the commission. In Lahore, thousands joined a silent protest march against the commission led by Lala Lajpat Rai, who was to die from a ruthless beating by Police Chief Scott. It was then and there that Bhagat Singh, along with Sukhdev and Rajguru, resolved to avenge the murder and plotted to kill Scott. However, in a case of mistaken identity, Bhagat Singh killed a junior officer, J.P. Saunders, and had to flee Lahore and go into hiding. In the face of increasing revolutionary activity, the British government enacted the Defence of India Act to give more power to the police. The Act was defeated in the Council by 1 vote. The government still pushed it through and passed the Act under the ordinance that claimed it as being in the best interests of the public. It was time for Bhagat Singh to come out of hiding. He volunteered to throw a bomb in the Central Assembly where the meeting to pass the ordinance was being held. The plan was letter perfect. On the 9th of April 1929, Bhagat Singh and B.K. Dutt would court arrest after throwing the bomb, not to cause death or injury, but to give a wake-up call to the suppressive regime. "Long live revolution!" shouted the two revolutionaries in unison as they courted arrest after throwing the bomb and showering handouts in the corridor of the Delhi Central Assembly. The handout read,
"It takes a loud voice to make the deaf hear." With these immortal words uttered on a similar occasion by Vaillant, a French anarchist martyr, do we strongly justify this action of ours. We want to emphasize the lesson often repeated by history. It is easy to kill individuals, but you cannot kill the ideas. Great empires crumbled while the ideas survived. Long live the revolution!
He wanted not to hurt anybody.
Kuldeep Nair, veteran journalist, looks back to that day.
If he wanted to do that, he would have, the bomb itself would have been more lethal. He purposely prepared that way. He wanted the rulers at that time, or the members in the Central Assembly, to listen to the voice of the people because they were discussing a law against the trade unions and also a law which would have meant, which did mean ultimately, more restrictions on individuals' liberty, individual liberty. He was protesting about that. So he wanted to open their ears, as he put it, and he proved the point.
Vijay Narayan Sinha, a comrade of Bhagat Singh's, takes us down memory lane and Kingsway, now Rajpath, in this archival recording.
पकड़े जाने के पहले 1929 के अप्रैल के महीने में हम दोनों दिल्ली के राजपथ पर घूम रहे थे.
One day in April 1929, with a few days before the bombing, both of us were taking a stroll down Rajpath in Delhi. We had just returned from the Central Assembly, which we call Parliament today, after having given final shape to our plans as to where Bhagat Singh would be seated and how the leaflets and the bomb would be thrown. Against a backdrop of the setting sun, we saw little boys and girls, beautiful like flowers, frolicking around India Gate. Bhagat Singh suggested we stay a while. With wistful eyes, he drank in the sight. He was an artist. I could sense what crossed his mind. Such occasions would be rare in the future. I asked him if he believed in reincarnation, to which he said no. When asked if he were to be reborn, how would he see it? He promptly replied that he would choose to be born in Africa. He was deeply distressed about the atrocities meted out to the blacks by the whites there.
Meanwhile, within days of Bhagat Singh's arrest, police cracked down on a house in Lahore used as a bomb manufacturing workshop. The trail led to countrywide arrests, and the killers of Saunders were identified. The Lahore conspiracy case became a sensational event which Bhagat Singh and his fellow revolutionaries used as a leverage to the advantage of the freedom movement. Their strategy? To prolong the case and to use the court as a platform for propagating the aims and objectives of the Revolutionary Party.
मेरा रंग दे बसंती चोला मेरा रंग दे बसंती चोला मेरा रंग दे बसंती चोला मेरा रंग दे बसंती चोला.
Fiery speeches and anti-British statements were being made during the trial. Feisty statements issued from the prison cell defending the killing of Saunders. From his prison cell, Bhagat Singh also wrote that impassioned letter to his father.
Father, you know that we have been pursuing a definite policy in this trial. Every action of mine ought to have been consistent with that policy, my principle and my program. At present, the circumstances are altogether different. But had the situation been otherwise, even then, I would have been the last man to offer defense. I had only one idea before me throughout the trial. That is to show complete indifference towards the trial in spite of the serious nature of the charges against us. I have always been of the opinion that all the political workers should be indifferent and should never bother about the legal fight in the law courts, and should boldly bear the heaviest possible sentences inflicted upon them. They may defend themselves, but always from purely political considerations and never from a personal point of view. Our policy in this trial has always been consistent with this principle. Whether we were successful in that or not is not for me to judge. We have always been doing our duty with a sense of detachment.
Rajshekhar Vyas looks upon Bhagat Singh as an emotional revolutionary.
Only emotional people can change the world. Buddha, Mahavir, Gandhi, Subhash are all the genius who turned this country, our world, who shook this world. Maybe an emotional person. So they play their part in building the nation. Still we can following these lines of Bhagat Singh that someone must weep so that others may laugh. Someone must suffer so that others may save. Someone must die so that others may live.
Yes, someone must weep so that others may laugh. Someone must die so that others may live. Lines by an emotional revolutionary. Bhagat Singh was a man of letters too, adds Rajshekhar Vyas.
Bhagat Singh turned into a scientific revolutionary, and he turned as a visionary, as a thinker, greater than Marx and Lenin, I think so, and even all the contemporary leader of that time. He think about the class consciousness, he think about the globalization also. So the whole transformation of Bhagat Singh from an emotional revolutionary to a scientific revolutionary, proved by his write-ups, articles, literatures, and documents, and the manifesto, and the pamphlets, and papers. You can kill the person, you can't kill the thought. According to him, freedom does not mean transfer of power from the white to beg, but the real freedom lays in the providing food to the man. But Bhagat Singh was in a view that pistol and bomb do not bring revolution, but the sword of revolution is shaped on the anvil of thoughts.
In the statement accompanying the text of the Lahore Conspiracy Case Ordinance, the Viceroy had stated that the accused in this case were trying to bring both law and justice into contempt. The situation afforded us an opportunity to show to the public whether we were trying to bring law into contempt or whether others were doing so. People might disagree with us on this point. You might be one of them. But that never meant that such moves should be made on my behalf without my consent and even my knowledge. My life is not so precious, at least not to me, as you may probably think it to be. It is not at all worth buying at the cost of my principles.
Bhagat Singh used his time in jail to fight for prison reforms. He fasted. He wrote. He grew in stature and popularity. It was time to cut him down to size. A special tribunal was set up to speed up the case, which duly pronounced the death sentence on Singh, Rajguru and Sukhdev. Vijay Narayan Sinha shares with us his memories of that day.
जब फांसी की सज़ा सुनाई जा चुकी थी, उस समय हम उनके डिफेंस संबंधी सलाह के बहाने फांसी के कोठी में उनसे मिले। पहले वो चिपक कर गले लगा लिए और तब बोले कि क्या खबर है। हमने कहा कि उनके फांसी रोकने के आंदोलन को देश में और तेज करने के लिए अपील कर दी जाए, जिससे कुछ समय और मिल सके। अपील सिर्फ इस बात पर हो कि लाहौर कॉन्स्पिरेसी केस ऑर्डिनेंस, जिसके अनुसार हमें दंडित किया गया है, वो अवैध है। सरदार घबरा से गए और बोले कि विजय, कहीं ऐसा न हो कि हमारी फांसी सचमुच रुक जाए। हमारे समाजवादी क्रांति के दर्शन का सबसे अच्छा प्रचार मेरे मृत्यु से ही हो सकती है। मेरे जीते रहने से नहीं, ऐसे थे हमारे प्रिय सरदार।
Such a man was our Sardar. So steely his resolve to die, so steady his hand that pulled the noose towards himself. Brother Kultar Singh recounts.
फांसी के दिनों में कोहड़ी में हम जब उनसे मिलने के लिए जाते थे तो वो बहुत खुश रहते थे, हम लोगों को भी हंसाते थे और खुशी खुशी बातें करते थे। फांसी कोहड़ी में उनका वज़न बढ़ा और जिस दिन उनको फांसी की तरफ ले जाना था तो वो सारा दिन गीत गाते रहे और बड़ी खुशी से झूमते हुए फांसी के तख्ते पर वो गए और भारत माता की जय और इनकलाब जिंदाबाद के नारे लगाते हुए उन्होंने रस्से को चूमा और अपने गले में अपने हाथ से डाला।
Father, I'm quite perplexed. I fear I might overlook the ordinary principle of etiquette and my language may become a little harsh while criticizing or rather censoring this move on your part. Let me be candid. I feel as though I have been stabbed in the back. Had any other person done it, I would have considered this to be nothing short of treachery. But in your case, let me say that it has been a weakness. A weakness of the worst type. This was a time where everybody's mettle was being tested. Let me say, Father, you have failed. I know you are as sincere a patriot as one can be. I know you have devoted your whole life to the cause of Indian independence, but why at this moment have you displayed such a weakness? I cannot understand.
Bhagat Singh himself displayed no weakness. His head remained unbowed till the last. Kuldeep Nayyar bears testimony to this.
Now he was taken to the gallows, and the warden was with him, and he said to him, Bhagat Singh, now that you are going to die in a minute, why don't you invoke the name of God, seek his forgiveness? Bhagat Singh said, you think God is so naive? He knows that I have never believed in him. But to save his life, he is now trying to invoke my name. He said he would. Don't you think he would see through the whole thing?
The end came on March 23, 1931. But in his last letter to Kultar Singh, Bhagat Singh talks not of endings, but new beginnings.
आखिरी जो उन्होंने मेरे नाम खत भी लिखा, आखिरी मुलाकात के वक्त 20 दिन पहले उनकी फांसी से मेरी आंखों में आंसू आ गए तो उन्होंने उसके लिए मुझे खत लिखा कि तुम्हारी आंखों में आंसू देख के मुझे बहुत रंज हुआ, खुश रहना, मेहनत से पढ़ना, और शेर लिखे, चिरागे सेहर हूँ, बुझा चाहता हूँ, ये मुश्ते खाक फानी है, रहे रहे ना रहे, खुश रहो अहले वतन, हम तो सफ़र करते हैं।
खुश रहो अहले वतन, हम तो सफर करते हैं।
इस तरह से उन्होंने अपनी जिंदगी खुशी से
हम
बिताई
भी
और आखिर वक्त उनका जो मकसद था कि देश को जगाने के लिए बलिदान अपने आप को बलिदान करके देश को जगाने में इनकलाब जिंदाबाद का नारा जो दिया, उससे गरीबों में, मजदूरों में, किसानों में एक नई जागृति आई।
There was a last letter for his comrades too.
Friends, it is natural to have the desire to live, and I am no exception. I would not like to conceal it. But it is conditional. I don't want to live as a prisoner or under restrictions. My name has become a symbol of the Indian Revolution. The ideals and sacrifices of the Revolutionary Party have elevated me to a height beyond which I will never be able to rise if I live. Yes, one thing pricks me today. my heart nurtured some ambitions for doing something for humanity and for my country. I have not been able to fulfill even 1,000th part of those ambitions. If I live, I might perhaps get a chance to fulfill them. If ever it came to my mind that I should not die, it came from this end only. I'm proud of myself these days, and I'm anxiously waiting for the final test. I wish the day may come nearer soon. Your comrade, Bhagat Singh.
But the other letter waits to be signed off. The letter to his father.
In the end, I would like to inform you and my other friends and all the people interested in my case that I have not approved of your move. I am still not in favor of offering any defense. Even if the court had accepted that petition submitted by some of my co-accused regarding defense, etc., I would have not defended myself. My application submitted to the tribunal regarding my interview during the hunger strike was misinterpreted, and it was published in the press that I was going to offer defense, though in reality I was never willing to offer any defense. I still hold the same opinion as before. My friends in the Borstal jail will be taking it as a treachery and betrayal on my part. I shall not even get an opportunity to clear my position before them. I want that the public should know all the details about this complication, and therefore I request you to publish this letter. Your loving son, Bhagat Singh.
A letter to a father, a society, and a nation. The writer died young, but the letter and its spirit lives on. Bhagat Singh's death had the effect he desired. Thousands were inspired to carry his torch, his vision, his dream of a free nation. Rajshekhar Vyas carries the thought further.
Bhagat Singh will always live in our thoughts, in our heart, our brain, and the revolutionary or the legendary, the dreamers, they can't die. So Bhagat Singh always live in our thoughts, our hearts. And I always feel that our youth will carry the torch of Bhagat Singh.
On March 23, 1931, a martyr's time was up. But martyrdom was an idea whose time had come. As a hero walked into the sunset, the sun had begun its westward journey to set upon an empire.